Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I wanted to look back at some ESPN preseason projections for this NBA season and just see kind of how they turned out in terms of where they had teams in the standings and their projected win totals. But before I get started, I just want to let you guys know that this is not me throwing shade at ESPN. I know that's kind of a popular thing to do, but I'm not trying to give any kind of impression that they did something demonstrably wrong by being wrong about some of these projections. I've been wrong about plenty of things on this channel. I've exposed myself for some of the things that I've gotten wrong, and I've gotten plenty of things wrong in these preseason projections as well, which I'm going to talk about throughout the video. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm just crushing them for being wrong. The only other thing is, if you'd like me to look back at some other stuff, whether it be award race predictions or anything like that, then be sure to let me know and I will for sure do that. But with all that said, let's go ahead and just get right into it. So we're going to begin over at ESPN with their Eastern Conference standing predictions. And number one, they have the Boston Celtics with a projected record of 58-24, talking about the fact that Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving are going to be coming back to a team that played extremely well in the playoffs. This is one that a lot of people got wrong, myself included. I had the Celtics listed as my number one team in the preseason. There's been a lot of people that have been kind of roasted for projecting them to be that good, and then obviously they've had more than their fair share of issues, but this is one that you'll probably find pretty consistently across a lot of different outlets. Number two, the Toronto Raptors projected record 55-27 says the Raptors added an MVP caliber talent this summer and their win projection is lower, ? Toronto won 59 games last season, but the uncertainty surrounding Kawhi Leonard's health likely left our panel leery of pushing Toronto's win total too high. Now, I also had the Raptors as my number two team in the East, and as of right now, that has come to fruition, although it's a different number one team than most of us expected to be preseason. But right now, they're pretty much, I'd say, probably a little bit better than a lot of people thought they would be. Their depth has been really good. Guys like Pascal Siakam have taken a leap. Kawhi Leonard has been everything that we would have hoped that he would be, coming back from injury despite having missed some games here and there on back-to-backs and things like that. But just like every Toronto season, the real test is going to be in the playoffs and how well they play in the postseason. So that still remains to be seen. But for preseason predictions, at least, ESPN was right on with this one. Number three, once again, this is a team that I had in the exact same spot, and that's the Philadelphia 76ers. Projected record 53-29 says our panel predicted the 76ers to win a mere 37 games last summer, but voters clearly trust the process now. And this is something that has been pretty true. The Sixers have had more than their fair share of issues at times, and things have been a bit dramatic at times as well. And this is obviously a completely different roster at this point in the year than the one that they started with, but they're probably going to finish around the 3 or the 4 spot in the East. That record is pretty spot on as well. So again, pretty correct. Number four now, Indiana Pacers projected record 47-35, and this is the first one that's actually different between what I had and what they had. I had the Bucks actually at the 4 spot, which we're going to talk about next. Projected record 47-35. This was probably about right before Victor Oladipo got hurt, and the Pacers are still playing well without him, but that obviously has kind of thrown everything out of whack, and I don't know. It's going to depend moving forward on Oladipo's health, how healthy he comes back next year. But this year, they're probably just going to be a 4th or a 5th seed in the playoffs and more than likely lose in the first round. And now we're getting to a truly interesting one, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks. Projected record 47-35. Obviously, there was the coaching change, and nobody really anticipated that Coach Bud was going to have this big of an impact on this team because they've almost reached that 47 win total right now, and there's still right around 20 games left in the season. I had the Bucks at the 4th spot in my preseason predictions, but obviously they are now with the best winning percentage in the entire league. Number 6, one spot ahead of where I had them, is the Washington Wizards, who have been a lot worse than most people thought they would be coming into the season. Projected record 44-38. I don't think there's any way that they're going to be above 500. I also don't really think that they're going to make the playoffs. John Wall is out. They traded Otto Porter. Markieff Morris is no longer there. And now it's basically just Bradley Beal trying to drag them to the postseason, but they've been a complete disaster right from the start. They barely won any games at the beginning of the season. They never found a way to turn it around. Things are not looking great for the Wizards or for this projection, to be honest. But number 7 now is the Miami Heat. I had the Heat at number 6. They are outside of the playoff picture at the moment. Projected record 43-39, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat turn it around and hovered around 500 and ended up making the playoffs. And once you get this late into the East standings and you never really know what's going to happen from year to year because there's so many not bad teams trying to fight for this playoff spot, but so many, I'd say, below average NBA teams trying to fight for the last 2 playoff spots. And that's kind of where the Heat are right now, so we'll see where they end up. Speaking of below average NBA teams fighting for a playoff spot, the Detroit Pistons at number 8, which is right where I had them as well. That might end up being where they finish. They're fighting for the 8th spot right now. Projected record 38-44. Dwayne Casey has, I guess, kind of helped them a little bit, but they're just not very good. Reggie Jackson's not very good. Andre Drummond's been playing much better lately. Blake Griffin was an all-star, but their backcourt play is just not very good. They don't have very good wings, and they're just rolling with two pretty good frontcourt players and trying to push towards the playoffs with those two guys. Number 9 now, the Charlotte Hornets, projected record 35-47 as the 9th seed in the East. That's pretty gross, but the Hornets might end up being a playoff team this year. They're getting kind of close. They're continuing to fight. Kemba Walker's been probably better than most people expected this season. Certainly in the beginning of the year when he was 1 or 2 leading the league in scoring per game. Kind of remains to be seen if this is going to come to fruition. They very well could fall off at the end of the year, and their win total could come pretty close to what they have here. And number 10 now, my very own Brooklyn Nets, and I didn't even project the Nets playing as well as they are right now or throughout the season in the preseason. I had them as a team to watch in my preseason predictions video in terms of potentially making the playoffs, but right now they're pretty well slotted into the 6th spot. They're not going to jump any higher than that, but it also doesn't really look like they're going to drop any lower than that, and they're going to blow the projected win total 32-50 out of the water. They've been playing so much better than I thought they would. D'Lo's been so much better. Karis LeVert was outstanding in the beginning of the year. Spencer Dinwiddie has been about what we expected. Jared Allen has been a little bit better. Just the depth in general, the shot making, the togetherness, the toughness, the fight that this team showed has been a lot better than most people expected, and that's why they are 4 spots higher at the moment than what they were projected prior to the year. And honestly, with these last couple of East teams, I'm not going to go through them one by one. Like the Cavs are probably too high at 31-51. Magic, right, pretty close. Bulls, pretty close. Knicks, pretty close. Hawks are probably going to outpace that 22-win pace, but there's nothing really to talk about here. Everybody knew prior to the season these teams weren't really trying to win, with the exception of maybe the Magic, and they've been a little bit better than this 30-52 would probably indicate. But there's really nothing to talk about here. I'm not going to go through every single one of these teams and talk about how well they haven't tanked. Which is going to allow me to move on now to the Western Conference standing predictions. And at number 1, which is very consistent, probably across everybody's preseason predictions, is the Golden State Warriors. Not going to spend a ton of time here. Says boredom was probably the Warriors' biggest problem last season. The signing of All-Star center DeMarcus Cousins definitely adds some excitement. Projected record 61-21. That seems spot on. I'm not going to take too long with these guys. But this is where things get interesting in the West pretty much immediately. Number 2, the Houston Rockets at 57-25. I had the Rockets as my number 2 team in the preseason as well. A lot of people were freaking out about them losing some wing depth and that potentially hurting them a lot. And it certainly did hurt them a lot in the beginning of the year, and then James Harden has just gone on a complete tear ever since. Potentially the MVP this year. I doubt they're going to get to that 57 win total, but they're probably going to be a top 4 or 5 seed, in the Western Conference playoffs. But losing those wings certainly did hurt. They had a lot of injury issues to Chris Paul and Clint Capella that James Harden has had to carry them through, but they're also a team that I would be pretty afraid of playing in the postseason just because of their shot-making ability and because of James Harden. Number 3 now, this is one that I got a lot of heat for in the preseason, not having the Utah Jazz higher than I did, which was number 5, which is probably going to be right about where they end up once you get to this point in the Western Conference standings. Once you get past basically the Nuggets, the Warriors, and to a certain extent the Thunder, everything else just kind of gets jumbled up, and you can really slide up and down a couple of spots just with 4 or 5 games. Jazz projected record 49-33. They obviously played outstanding in the postseason last year as well as post All-Star break. They killed the Thunder in the postseason series, and a lot of people had them as a team that was going to make a big jump. And in the beginning of the season, they were struggling. They were under 500, but just like last year, they're starting to come on strong here at the end of the season. And so we'll kind of see where exactly they end up, but they have them at the 3rd spot. I don't think they're going to get that high just because of teams like the Nuggets and OKC. And so my prediction of them being the 5 spot is probably going to be a little bit more true than them being at the 3. Next up now with the exact same record as the Jazz, or at least projected record as the Jazz, 49-33, the Oklahoma City Thunder. And nobody really anticipated Paul George becoming like an MVP candidate, MVP caliber player this season. He's not really in the running. He's just kind of the 3rd guy that everybody likes to talk about outside of Giannis and James Harden, but he's been outstanding. Russ has continued to struggle shooting-wise as well as from the free throw line, which is an issue, but he's doing a lot more little things than he has in the past, which has really helped his team, and they're really, really good defensively. So having them at about the 4 spot makes sense. They're probably going to end up in that 3 or 4 range. I had them listed as the 4 seed as well. So far, honestly, throughout the East and the West, a lot of these are pretty well spot on, with the exception of like the Bucks being 1 instead of 4 and things like that. Number 5 now, this was a pretty big surprise to this point in the season. That's the Denver Nuggets being really the second best team in the West, and a really, really scary team to play on a night-to-night basis with their offensive ability, their depth, and obviously Nikola Jokic. They have them as a projected record of 47-35. Remember, this is a team that missed out on the playoffs last season by a single game, and a lot of people expected their youth to continue to help them move forward and develop and make another jump, which they have, but not to the extent that a lot of people, or to an even further extent than a lot of people thought they would. After Denver came up 1 win short of the playoffs last season, we're projecting the Nuggets to end a postseason drought that stands at 5 years. They're certainly going to make the playoffs. I have a little bit of question about them in the postseason, potentially struggling in certain matchups, being able to game plan Nikola Jokic out of his incredible numbers that he's been putting up in the regular season. Have a bit of concerns about them as a potential upset as a 2 or 3 seed in the postseason, but this one was a little bit off, but I think we were all pretty much off on the Nuggets, who, by the way, I had listed as the 7th team in my preseason projections. And now we have one that I'm going to fully admit I completely missed on. The LA Lakers, they have them listed at 6, at 46-36. They're not going to get that high. If they do make the playoffs, it's going to be as a 7 or 8 seed. I had the Lakers at number 3. I'll fully admit that. I thought that LeBron was going to have an outstanding season. I thought he was going to play more games, and I thought their young guys and that youth was going to really energize him, energize his team, and they were going to be a really fun team. And I just thought that the guys around Bron would be better, and I thought that he would be healthier. Obviously, the Lonzo Ball injury doesn't help. But I'm not trying to make excuses for it. I got it wrong. I overestimated how good Bron was going to be. I overestimated how good the Lakers in general were going to be. And even this projection is a little bit better than most people, or is a little bit better than they're going to end up being this season. But that's a big miss for me, for sure. Number 7 now, a team that I also missed on because I had them at 6, is the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, I didn't really anticipate the Anthony Davis thing coming midseason and kind of blowing up their year. Not that they were really going to make the playoffs before he made his trade demand, but it certainly didn't help. Made things really, really confusing for the rest of the players on the roster. It says the Pelicans went 20-9 in regular season games in which Anthony Davis and February trade pickup Nikola Mirotic played together. Mirotic is no longer with the team. He was traded at the trade deadline because they wanted to get assets because they knew they weren't going to make the playoffs. So yeah, this one, 45-37 projected record. They're not going to get there. They're probably not going to make the playoffs, but not completely crazy to put them there. Like I said, I had them at 6. Number 8 now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who I did not list in my own preseason playoff projections. I didn't have the Timberwolves in there just because the Jimmy Butler thing was weird. Obviously, at the time of me making my video and of this writing, Jimmy Butler was still on the Timberwolves and he hadn't been traded yet. Says there hasn't exactly been warm, fuzzy vibes coming from Minnesota, despite the Timberwolves making the playoffs for the first time since Kevin Garnett was just entering his prime. There have been persistent rumors and speculation about whether Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns are a tandem suited to last long term. And you also could throw Tom Thibodeau in there as well, who obviously got fired. Jimmy Butler got traded, but Karl Anthony Towns has been playing out of his mind, and this is a team that could potentially push towards the playoffs, but more than likely is going to finish right around the 9 or 10 spot in the Western Conference standings. Projected record 45-37. They're not going to get there. This one's questionable to me. I didn't really see why you would think that this would be a team that would really be able to come together and have good chemistry and be good enough to make the playoffs, despite the fact that they made the playoffs last year. Obviously, Jimmy Butler hadn't made his actual trade demand at the time of this writing, but that one's questionable to me for sure. Number 9 is a team that I got some heat for saying was going to end up missing the playoffs. I didn't have them in the playoffs, neither did ESPN. 44-38 projected record as the 9th seed in the West. That's crazy. But yeah, the Spurs right now are still in the playoff picture, but they've been sliding as of late. Their typical long road trip that they take this time of year did not go well at all. They only picked up 1 win on the road trip, and they could end up falling out of the playoffs, which is something that I projected preseason. Number 10, the Portland Trailblazers. This is a pretty big miss. The Trailblazers are going to make the playoffs. They might have home court advantage in the first round. I had them as the 8th seed in my preseason projections, and having them at 10 with a 43-39 projected record after they were the 3 seed last year. A little bit disrespectful, but like we've talked about before, last year's West playoff standings were ridiculous. You could be the 3 seed and a week later you could be out of the playoff picture, or out of the playoffs, excuse me. So having them at 10 isn't all that disrespectful, but they're going to end up making the playoffs, so this was definitely a miss. Number 11, another team that might end up making the playoffs despite trading away Obviously, Tobias Harris. The LA Clippers projected record at 35-47. So this is where ESPN saw the big drop off in terms of record from teams that could make the playoffs to teams that really didn't have that much of a chance. They're probably going to end up right around the 8 or 9 spot. They're still really fighting for that 7th spot, but I just kind of feel like eventually we're going to see them start to slide and start to feel the effects of trading away Tobias Harris, and they very well could still end up making the playoffs. You never know. Number 12, the Memphis Grizzlies, who for a while there in the beginning of the season were looking like a team that could have really turned it around and end up making the playoffs, despite the fact that people really didn't have high expectations for them. 33-49 projected record prior to the season. Obviously, things tailed off pretty significantly from those first 20 games or so. Marc Gasol started playing worse. Mike Conley started playing worse. Marc Gasol is not even on the team anymore as he was traded to Toronto, obviously. So this is one that I think a lot of people assumed that the Grizzlies weren't going to be very good, and we started to sweat about that a little bit in the beginning of the year, but it turned out to not be the case. Really, the only other team I want to talk about here at the end, I don't want to talk too much about, teams like the Mavs or Suns. The Suns have been awful. The Mavericks were pretty good early in the season. They're probably going to finish right around 38, 39, 40 wins. Luka Doncic has been great. The team I want to talk about, though, the Sacramento Kings, listed as the projected 15th team in the West standings, only 24-58 as a projected record. And this is a team that I was hugely wrong about as well, as I think most people were. There was a big storyline at the beginning of the season when the Kings were good, basically, when they actually were playing well. And I, in a preseason video, talked about how the Celtics were set up extremely well moving forward because they have the Kings pick. And I said the Kings pick was going to be top 5, and I felt really confident about that. I didn't think that they had a ton of talent. I didn't think that De'Aaron Fox was going to take a leap. I didn't think that Buddy Hield was going to take a leap. I didn't think that Marvin Bagley was going to be all that good. But they've just kind of figured it out. Like, they've just put everything together all of a sudden. I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs just because there's a lot of competition for that spot, and they're a young team that's never been there before, so trying to put it together this late might not end up working out. But I will fully admit I was completely wrong. ESPN was completely wrong. I'm sure most outlets were completely wrong about the Sacramento Kings. They're a lot better than everybody thought, whether they make the playoffs this year or not. They definitely put some people on notice and made some people look stupid, like myself and like the people that wrote this article, had them as the last seed in the Western Conference. But yeah, that is going to be the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you would like to see more of these kinds of videos, then be sure to let me know, obviously, down in the comment section below. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.